Welcome back, everybody. It's your time to EdUp on the EdUp Experience podcast, where we make education your business. This is Dr. Joe Salustio back with you again. And as I have said in many of the episodes I have done recently, co-founder and producer extraordinaire Elvin Freitas, my business partner, has repeatedly berated me to not put a timestamp on these episodes. But I will say, we are recording this in 2025. When in 2025, I don't know, but I'm pretty sure that this episode is being recorded and will come out in 2025 at better. Elvin, and a lot of people don't know this about Elvin. My partner, Elvin Freitas, co-founder of this podcast, has produced every one of the 1,000+ episodes we've created. He has produced more episodes, podcast episodes, than anyone in the world when it's related to higher education. Dude is an absolute machine. He's a machine, and I want to give a shout-out to Elvin as we continue this great work that we're doing here at EdUp. Maybe you don't think it's great. We do, because we get to interview amazing people in and around higher education, and some of those amazing people get to co-host these episodes. They come back, and they come back, and they come back yet again. And I have sound effects for them, and I have a fond admiration for some of these people. And this person that's with me today is a former college and university president for many years, and now is doing some work at one of the most recognizable associations that we have out there. Let's see if I can bring her in. Here we go.
You again?
Oh, that's the wrong button. Let me try something different there. Sorry, my guest co-host. That was the wrong one. Here she is. She's Dr. Mary Papazian. She is the Executive Vice President at AGB. Mary, what's going on?
Hey, Joe. It's good to see you. And shout out to Elvin as well. He does a remarkable job, and both of you have really created this great space for real conversations around higher ed. So it's a real privilege to be here.
Did you like how I trolled you, though, at the beginning? That little sound effect, did you notice that? You avoided talking about it, but I thought I fit that in very nicely.
Yeah, that's okay. I mean, I keep coming back. I don't know what that means, but you've got me. Here I am.
It's an honor to have you. You've been, let me tell you something about you, Mary, that I recently, we were at a conference together, and you know everyone. It's like, hey, Mary. I'm standing there. I'm like, hey, I know you guys too. Does anybody want to acknowledge that I'm standing here? But you're the star.
I don't know about the star, but it just says I've been in this business a long time, Joe. So I don't know. I don't know what that means, but it's great. And I'm really excited about today's episode because we have an amazing guest, a great colleague, and somebody from whom I've learned a great deal. So I'm delighted to be here.
Wow. Well, that's a heck of a compliment. Here she is, ladies and gentlemen. She's Dr. Susan Elrod. She's a former chancellor of the University of Indiana University, South Bend. See, she gave me the information. I screwed it up anyway. Susan, how are you?
I'm great. And I'm so excited to be here with you, Joe, who I'm just getting to know, and with my longtime friend and colleague, Mary.
University of Indiana, or
No.
Indiana University, South Bend. You guys told me not to screw it up at the beginning of this, just so everybody knows before I hit the record button. Both Mary and Susan said, please don't screw that up. And I did. Indiana University, South Bend, IU, Indiana University, former chancellor as of very recently. So we're interviewing you because I can't put a timestamp on these episodes, but basically a month or so out from your official retirement. First of all, congratulations. And second of all, how are you feeling? Ellucian Live is taking place April 6th through 9th, 2025 in Orlando, Florida.
You just made the list!
Get ready for an unforgettable experience at Ellucian Live 2025. Join visionary leaders from institutions worldwide as we dive into groundbreaking ideas, cutting-edge solutions, and transformative best practices that will ignite your passion for innovation. This is your chance to connect, collaborate, and propel your institution into the future. Do not miss out.
Let's go!
We're excited to announce the first of its kind higher education podcast conference, brought to you by Edu Alliance, the EdUp Experience, and Podium. This is happening Saturday, July 12th at the University of Illinois Chicago campus. This is an in-person event, one day only, the first of its kind. This is for people working in and around higher education who are interested in starting a podcast, who may have a podcast, want to learn more about podcasting. So, If you want to be there, please go to higheredpodcon.com. That's higheredpodcon.com to learn how you can get your early bird registration, see who the keynote will be, and how you can submit proposals to be a part of this amazing inaugural conference. So that again, go to higheredpodcon.com to learn more. Do you want to accelerate your professional development? Do you want to get exclusive early access to ad-free episodes, extended episodes, bonus episodes, original content? That's right, original content, invites to special events, and more? Do you want to get all this while helping to sustain EdUp? Then go to edupexperience.com. That's EDUP experience.com and subscribe today.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I miss everybody in the town and on campus, but I am feeling good about where I'm headed and all the amazing things that happened while I was there. So proud of all the work we were able to do. I started right before the pandemic, literally 9 months before, and then led the campus through the pandemic, and then out of the pandemic on the other side into a growth environment for the campus, and also one where we did some hard work to create a financially sustainable future for the campus. We didn't put our head in the sand. We knew it was going to be hard, and we didn't say, oh, there are better days ahead, because there are not better days ahead. The environment in higher ed right now is so unsettled, so unpredictable. So I'm just so proud of all the work we did together. And I hope I get to talk about how I did that work, because I think it was how we did the work together that made it successful.
A piece of advice for everybody.
Come on, guys. Early worm gets the worm.
And that's the truth, right? We get through COVID. We're trying to create sustainability in our institutions. We're seeing institutions continue to close, or at least hit some troubling times. So it's the how that matters most. So you know what? The great thing about this podcast is you get to talk about what you want to talk about, Susan. And I'm going to hand it over to Mary to do her thing. But what is the how? What was the special sauce, the special ingredients that helped you get the institution to be so successful?
Yeah. Well, in general, being a leader is about leading people. And so leading people means that you have to engage with them, you have to meet with them, you have to understand them. And the way that I think about it is in the context of what I call shared leadership. Some people refer to that as collective leadership or collaborative leadership or participatory leadership. A lot of words for it, but I co-authored a book with colleagues a while back on shared leadership in higher education. And over the last decade, I've really been working on developing that as a leadership strategy that I use. And so, for example, when we were coming out of the pandemic and we were returning to campus for on-campus instruction, I used a shared leadership approach. I got people organized into 8 different task forces with a steering committee of leaders. They were the ones that led our response to learning, our HR issues, our facilities issues. And so they were empowered to make recommendations and put things into practice. And I just was like a guide on the side, facilitating, making sure everybody was staying on track, resolving conflicts where there were those, 2 different groups couldn't decide, and they would say, hey, Chancellor, what do you think? And I would decide. And so everybody bought in, and everybody knew what was happening, and they had a stake in it. And that's why it was so successful. Just even our coming back to on-campus operations.
Epic.
So Susan, let me ask you. I mean, I'd like to spend some time during the podcast talking a little bit about your change leadership philosophy and some of the resources you've developed. But before we get there, I want to maybe take a moment to reflect back on your career.
Mm,
You weren't born into the presidency or the chancellorship. You didn't just know, the intuitively what this was in terms of effective change leadership. You're a geneticist by background, a PhD in biology.
yeah.
You've done a lot of work thinking about education, biological education, STEM education for students and how to impact change on that. How did your path, if you will, the journey that
Mm.
you've taken, kind of lead you to this place when you assumed the chancellorship at IU South Bend to be ready to, to face some of the issues and then come out stronger?
Mm. Wow. Um, so, thank you for mentioning that I'm a scientist. I think that is an important piece of who I am. It means I ask a lot of questions. It means I'm open to interpretations of situations, results, you might call them in the lab.
Probably likes data too. Probably like
Yeah,
some data every now and then.
yeah, and I'm a data-driven leader, absolutely. So I think that's the foundation for really what ended up being my leadership approach. Also, science is a very collaborative endeavor. It's a very creative endeavor, but a very collaborative endeavor. I know a lot of people kind of think about the mad scientist all by themselves in the lab, which does happen. But in general, if you look at, scientific publications and results, it's usually not a single person. It's multiple people, and especially on really complex problems. Some of there's like 40 authors on a paper that could come out. And so I think that question asking, being open to interpretations, always experimenting, but then also being part of the collaborative endeavor of science is the foundation for what kind of a leader I am. And so as I was a dean, and then I was a provost and eventually chancellor at IU South Bend. And I am also a learner. I read everything. I read books. I'm always looking for research-based approaches. Again, must be the scientist in me. And so when I came across this idea of shared leadership, it was maybe 8 or more years ago. I thought, this is it. This is how you do it. You engage people in the difficult problems and questions and get everybody involved. They may not like it. They may have their heads in the sand, or they may be resistant to change.
Yikes!
Exactly. Yikes. But if you engage people, you'll make progress. So I found that approach, and then I worked with other colleagues, great colleagues of mine, Judith Romali, who is a 3-time retired president of colleges and universities, amazing. Adriana Kezar, who's a leader in higher education, leadership and change, and Elizabeth Holcomb, who is a senior researcher at USC in the Polius Center. And so we really just dove into that. And our book has some case studies, which is great. But I've been thinking about also writing a paper called The Promise and Peril of Shared Leadership, because it's risky, but I think the promise is great. And so that's kind of how I came to this particular approach.
Yeah, I find it so interesting because you come from it to it as a scientist. I have a background in the humanities, and we rarely have a joint or multi-author publications. It really is the scholar in the library, if you will, doing their work. And so it's a really different approach. And we always thought of scientists as very linear thinkers. But what you're describing is something that's much more dynamic, iterative, and as you said, creative. And, part of, I would imagine, the success of this kind of approach is an ability to speak across difference, particularly the different experiences, trainings, what have you. Talk a little bit about how you your scientific approach is on the one hand helpful, but how you've had to perhaps sort of modulate it around the edges so that you can speak the language of people with other backgrounds.
Right. I think this is a pitfall that a lot of executive leaders fall into. And that is feeling like you have to know everything. And so as a scientist, there's just no way you know everything about the universe or biological systems or whatever it is. I mean, we're still discovering all kinds of things, the depths of the ocean, And so I think, first of all, having an approach that is kind of humble. Like I don't have all the answers. I know when I was a faculty member in teaching, one of the first kind of difficulties I faced was admitting to the class that I didn't know something. But what I would say is, but let's figure it out, or I'll get back to you, or something like that. And so I think leaders need to also be able to do that. Because a single, more heads are better than one, that's kind of an old cliche. But it's true. So I think that humble approach to problems, knowing that I don't know the answer, I might have some ideas about the answer, like a scientist does. You make a hypothesis, but you might prove your hypothesis wrong in the end, and you have to be okay with that. And so I think that being humble and knowing that you don't know everything. But then I think the second mistake that maybe a lot of leaders make is they don't listen to people. And so I think that listening to people and then also being able to say, wow, I didn't think of that. Thank you. And then let's talk about what that means in terms of what we're trying to do. So an apology goes a long way. Like, I am sorry. I didn't understand your perspective, but thank you for sharing it. Now let's talk. So I think that listening part, that's sort of like the experimentation part, or reading the literature. When you start an experiment, you always go, what's the prior research on this? Like, you can't start new. You might do something that's already been done, right? So you have to understand that. So there's a lot of listening and understanding that that goes on, I think, in this approach.
That's a fact. That's a fact.
I like the call out to listening. Let me just turn the dial on that just a little bit, because I think we have so many distractions, and I have so many conversations with college presidents and been in the industry for myself for 25 years or so. My phone's ringing, my desk phone's ringing, if you even have one of those. You're a college president, you've got a donor coming in on the hour, you've got an employee in front of you who is frustrated about something. You've got an idea, you've got to listen, and it's easy to just go, well, I'll get to that later. You know what? That's great. That's great. I know you're frustrated. Great idea. We're going to have to just shove you to the side here because I have this other thing coming up. It's not like you have so much time, Susan, as a college president, to get all of that done. Ideally, we'd like to listen to stories of everybody's lives and know them, and that happens over time. How do you balance the imperative of the doing business part with the people part, which is the most important, but also often gets tossed to the side for the less personal items?
Yeah. I think you just have to come to grips that it's going to take more time. And when you're in charge, you set the pace. So you set a fast pace, or you set a snail's pace, or you set an appropriate pace. And so one thing that we talk a lot about in our Change Leadership Toolkit, which Mary alluded to earlier, is one of the most important things that a leader can do is not only establish a vision for what the change is going to look like, why we need to do it, where is it going to take us, but you have to set an appropriate pace for the change. Big, hairy change doesn't happen overnight. It takes years. And you also have to be able to be prepared to pivot, which is another thing I think that leaders are afraid to do, because they're like, here's the course. We must keep going on this course. Even though there's like bombs going off everywhere, explosions, and it's falling apart, that's a good time to accept reality and go, wait, maybe we're not doing the right thing. Maybe we need to step back. Maybe we need to stop. Maybe we need other people involved. Maybe we're not taking the right approach, whatever it is. Again, here's where the leader has to listen, be responsive, adjust the pace. I can't tell you how many times over the course of my career, particularly as a provost and a chancellor, where I had to say, I hear you. We're going to slow down. If you think we need different people on this committee, you tell me who those people are. Let's get the right people on the bus and in the room. I'm fine with that. I want to make sure we're staying on course, but I want everyone comfortable with where we're going, how we're doing it, because we're not going to get there comfortably if we're dragging people by their heels or their hair or screaming or they're about ready to quit. None of those are good ways to get big, hairy change done.
Yeah, I've had the same experience, Susan, in my presidencies in particular, but also when I was provost, that there are things that where you really do have to step back and give it more time and open up the aperture, if you will, of the camera a little bit, bring more voices in. And there are also times when you think you need to do that, and everything just lines right up, and suddenly you're just moving forward, and you have to be ready to do that as well. So it's kind of a both and. But I'd love to just kind of step back on this change leadership toolkit piece a little bit, because I think this is such important work. And there's no question, and you alluded to it, that there's tremendous headwinds in higher education right now. There's tremendous challenges that we all face. And I'm going to put on my AGB hat for a moment. This is something that we spend a lot of time talking to our trustees of our boards of trustees as well, how to understand the issues. And they often have a certain sense of a pace of change because of their fiduciary duties, which might look very different from the sense and pace of change for faculty who like to ponder and ruminate on things in a much more deliberate way. So I'm curious, as you were doing this work, because you really began this work before you became chancellor. Tell us a little bit about what is really interesting about the approach you take. How maybe it's a little different from other things that we've heard. And I'm going to follow up after you've done that and talk about how you're able to actually test it in your own chancellorship.
Yeah. So I've been working with Adriana Kizar for 15 years now, maybe more. And we met up when I was doing national work in STEM education, when I was director of Project Kaleidoscope at the Association of American Colleges and Universities, AAC&U, who's having a meeting next week, which I'm excited to also be at, talking about change leader strengths.
I'll see you there. I'll see you there.
Of
You
course.
just made the list.
Of course, Mary. It's such a great meeting where, you just see everyone there. It's, Joe, you were talking about Mary knows everybody. I'm barely going to be able to catch her as she's butterflying around the whole conference. Anyway.
We'll have our time, Susan.
We will have our time. Anyway, so Adriana and I met up and we just started working together on difficult issues in STEM higher education. Things like, how do you put an interdisciplinary program together? That's complicated. And so we worked together and had a few publications and we kind of outlined a process-oriented model for change. So you start with a vision, you do a landscape analysis, you figure out what you're going to do, and then you do it. That's a very fast summary. But where we came to over time was that nobody knows exactly how to make that process work. And so a very famous process model for change is the one published by John Cotter. He has an 8-step model for change. And there's a lot of discussion of change management. How do you manage the change? But very little discussion around how do you lead change, which is very different. And so our toolkit actually answers the question, how do you go about leading change using a process-oriented model? And so we have delineated 8 categories of what we call change leader moves or actions leaders take. We have also identified 7 different contextual areas that change leaders need to examine. So everything happens in context. You lead in context. Your context will make or break your leadership.
Is that given? Can you maybe illustrate that for our listeners a little bit so they can envision what you're describing?
Right. So one of our very popular context areas is politics. Politics on campus. And so this is power and influence, who's in charge of what, who are the allies, who are the skeptics, who are the influencers, who makes decisions, who doesn't. So if you're trying to create systemic change, which results in changes in structures, policies, attitudes, values, you're going straight into the headwinds of politics on your campus. Most people don't like politics because it can be ugly. It can be difficult. It can be mean. But if you're going to make that kind of change, you have to be able to navigate the political landscape on your campus. And so we help leaders think through and identify what are the political issues. Do you know who your allies are? Who are the skeptics? Who's never going to change their mind? Who might be open to changing their mind? And so that's one way that the toolkit helps people dive into the change landscape so they can figure out what to do next.
And describe the difference then between navigating the politics. I mean, I think this is a really important illustration versus being political.
Yeah. So I really think about it as a strategic approach to just understanding what you need to get done. And so if you need, for example, there's a very important Senate committee that's going to ultimately approve a policy or a curricular approach or something, you can't just go into that committee meeting cold, right? You want to get your thing approved. So you got to understand who's on the committee, who's influential, and who's going to be against it maybe. And then maybe in advance you have coffee with that person. Who's the chair? What's the chair's orientation? So that's just one committee meeting, right? And so maybe that's being political. I don't know. I think it's being strategic about getting what you need to done. And I had in my very early faculty career, I had an experience with this that I think really helped me understand this. I was on the college curriculum committee, and my department was putting forward changes to the degree, the biology degree, that in department meeting, I was vocal against. I didn't think it made sense. And so when it got to the college curriculum committee also said to me, this doesn't make any sense. We're not going to approve it. So the department thought I scuttled the proposal. When in the whole curriculum committee, I kept saying, I can't talk about this. You guys have to make a decision without my input, but the department didn't trust me. And so, oh my gosh, that led to a whole thing. But so that was a real experience that helped me understand the political nature of decision-making in higher education.
Yeah, no, that's a great example. And it doesn't get any easier, does it? I mean, we're seeing that today. Yeah.
No, I mean, I know, Joe, you want to say something, but so I was just a faculty member at that point. Imagine being the chancellor or the provost, and some decision gets made that everybody knows you swayed somehow or was aligned with what you thought. It becomes very difficult. And so I think the other thing that you have to do when you're leading in this sort of shared leadership approach is you have to be careful what you say. Like, I never reveal my hand until after the group does its work. Because otherwise, people go, oh, she already made up her mind. She's just putting this task force together to justify what she already wants. So you have to be that's a totally political thing. You have to say, nope, here are the parameters. Here's where we're trying to get to. We need a good how. How are we going to do it? What are the parameters going to be? And I have an example of that as well. And even so, people go, oh, you already want, whatever. Nobody ever believes that, or many people don't believe that you did not have it pre-baked, but I really never do.
I'm thinking so many things about how right you are. And then in my head, I'm thinking this.
I will not have you telling me what course to set.
Because the leader in me goes, wait a second here. And this is why I think where the balance is really, to your point, it's like such a delicate balance of, I know I have to accomplish these goals, right? I have a job I need to keep. I have a board I have strategic goals I need to achieve. I know that we have to do this, whatever this is. Maybe we need to cut programs. That's something that's really happening a lot. I know we need to do this, financial exigency or whatever it might be. I know this needs to happen. But if I do that and I don't have the support, I've got protests and pickets and the whole bit. If I do engage, I might still end up in the same place, even if I just said go and do it, right? I might have so much resistance that I end up in the same place. And so you're always hedging your bet almost against change. And we see it on the technology side in my day job at Ellucian. We see technology implementing new systems, people who have failed implementations. And there's just like, we come in and we at Ellucian, we can kind of save it if they've had a failed implementation before, but then you get change fatigue and people just go, you know what? I don't think it's ever going to get any better around here. Yeah. And that's the mindset you get in, especially if, and you know this, in the depths of the higher ed foundations, you have like the registrar where everything goes through the registrar. Most people don't understand how much influence and power a registrar has. And most of the time they've been there for like 47 years, a registrar. So they knew it back when the college was formed. All the catalog, all the credits, all the policies, all go. And then you just see these people that just go, nope, I'm not doing it. How do you reach down and pull up those feelings? Because you have to get through the feeling before you get the change, right? Are you going to miss Ellucian Live this year?
I don't think so.
Exactly. So you might as well register right now at elive.ellucian.com. Ellucian Live 2025, April 6th through 9th in Orlando, Florida. Do not miss it.
Higher Ed PodCon is coming. Go to higheredpodcon.com. That's higheredpodcon.com to learn more. Do you want to get exclusive early access to ad-free episodes, extended episodes, bonus episodes, original content, invites to special events, and more? Do you want to accelerate your professional development? Do you want to get all this while helping to sustain EdUp? Then go to edupexperience.com. That's EDUP experience.com and become a subscriber today.
Yeah. I think it goes back to that listening thing. I know that, I'm a kind of an impatient person too, which is counter to maybe what I was saying before about how you got to just be, humble. You got to admit it takes time. And so I'm probably famous. And if you ask colleagues that I've worked with for this, I just ask a lot of questions. Like, why are we doing it like that? Like, how come this takes so much time? Why
That's
can't
a great question.
Just do this, right? Like, what's the deal? So, when a chancellor asks that question, it gets some traction. If you're a faculty member and you ask that question, it might be harder for you to get the answer. So, and sometimes I would ask these questions and I would hit too many walls and I'd be like, okay, we're just going to set that aside for right now because there's other more important things for us to work on. But I never forget. I'm like an elephant. I remember one person I worked with when I was at UW Whitewater said, how do you remember all this stuff? I said, I don't know. It's all just important. And it keeps coming back up. Like, we haven't done this yet. Okay. Is it time to do that now? And so I think you you have to be persistent in a way, but then you have to also just keep asking questions. One really common error I think that a lot of people on campuses make is we can't do that because there's a policy about that. Policy that says we can't do that.
This is lunacy.
Exactly. And so when I arrived as chancellor at IU South Bend, I'd get people saying, oh, we can't do that because there's a blah, blah, blah. And I would say, could you show me the policy? 9 times out of 10, nobody could show me the policy. And I said, okay, well, then we're going to stop doing that. And we're going to do it the way we think makes sense. We're going to make our own policy. So I think it goes back to question asking, being patient, engaging with people, listening, and at some point you may even get into a conversation where somebody just says, we're not doing it because I'm afraid. I've done it like this for 30 years. I don't know how to do it in another way, and I'm scared. So then you have to attend to that you can't just say, well, then you're out, which some people do, right? You can't do it the new way, you're out. So then you got to help that person. So this gets back to, it's all about people. You got to help that person, professional development, figure out how they can, whatever it is that they need to do that. And maybe they'll make a decision that they don't want to do that job anymore. And that's fine. Or maybe they'll go, you know what? I like this new way better. So I think those are some things from my experience, I guess. And Mary, you've probably got some as well.
No, I think that's really, really great. And I think that moment of acknowledging fear is actually a really positive moment, because when that happens, resistance goes away.
Mm-hmm.
And particularly if you're listening and really thinking about the good reasons why that fear might exist, because it doesn't exist in a vacuum. There's probably reasons for it. So you've been thinking a lot then about change leadership, and I really like that distinction between change leadership and change management. And you've developed some research with your colleagues on that and published on it. And then you've had this long experience on campuses at different levels of leadership, but also at a national level, I think, through the association work that you've done. And with all of that, you step into the chancellorship at IU South Bend, thinking you're all ready to implement all of that, and then you're hit with COVID, which probably after gulping first, there was, I really want to kind of unpack a little bit the process you used to think about all that you've learned. Obviously, you came into it thinking about how you would lead change. I'm assuming you felt there was change to be had, and how you did that in the context of COVID and that environment.
Yeah. So what I said to people, after the pandemic kind of really became a reality was, I knew there'd be challenges in my chancellorship. Really wasn't counting on the 100-year plague, which I used to teach about because I taught a lot of microbiology. So, and my husband will say, corroborate me on this. As soon as it became apparent what was happening, I said 2 years. And in fact, it was a very difficult 2 years. Sorry, my balloon motif is going off there, not on purpose. I think what helped me was that I'm a scientist, and I knew it was going to pass. I knew it was going to be horrendous. And what I had to do as the leader was attend to the people. Again, we did grab and go lunches. We had, a million Zoom meetings, but we'd go around with masks. I would check in with different groups. It was about the people. And I think people trusted me around the pandemic because I'm a scientist. So many faculty said, we're so happy we have a scientist as a chancellor at this time, because we believe you when you say things about what we should do or what is happening or, where are we headed? And so I think that helped me in the whole thing. And so as the enrollment declines were occurring, it was awful, right? And of course, the federal, her funding, man, thank you, federal government, for that Band-Aid. It was great. But obviously that was cash, right? It wasn't anything that was gonna be able to be used once it was spent, right? And so one of the big challenges I think we have as higher education leaders is helping everybody understand the difference between cash and the base budget.
That's the truth right there. You better believe that.
Totally. And so I remember as we were coming out of the pandemic, the faculty were like, why can't we just keep using that money? It's like, because we're out of it. We've
Tell them like it is.
We spent it all. There isn't any left. And it's cash. You can't hire long-term people on cash. So I did a lot of budget education, which was helpful. But, I knew, so this is the other thing I think that leaders have to do is they have to face the reality of what they're in. And so I did that. And I led my executive team in the development of a financial sustainability initiative that we launched in 2022. And we got to work immediately on, here's the reality. We're down 7% from where we were 2 years ago. That's a lot of money, revenue. And we're not going to grow out of that. So we've got to figure out how to cut. And we're not going to just do it across the board. We're going to be strategic about it. And so we started working on the budget right away because I knew what the reality was. I didn't want to be, I kept telling the faculty, I'm trying to keep us out of the Chronicle. I don't want an article written about how IU South Bend has this huge deficit, had to fire all kinds of people, and then the chancellor got a vote of no confidence and had to resign. I don't want any of that. So we just were honest. And then I used a shared leadership approach. So going back to the Change Leadership Toolkit, context drives everything. And so I use the context of our situation to help us figure out how to move ahead. What were we going to do next? And I had a great executive team that I could not have led this without. So amazing provost, CFO, chief of staff, advancement person, student affairs, leadership. So it also takes a team that can be honest with one another, that can push back on me, which they did. Boy, some of our cabinet meetings were pretty raucous, not in a disrespectful way, but we got into some pretty heavy discussions. So that's kind of how we did it.
So yeah, and it takes that kind of a team, absolutely. So as you were doing that, how much of your brain was thinking about, this moment as a way to facilitate and create the possibilities for a change that you knew had to happen anyway? Beyond, how much was some people have talked about, the tragedy of COVID. It allowed them still to do some things and to catalyze some positive change that they wanted to make. I wondered if you could talk about that, particularly in the context of some of those leadership levers that you speak about in your toolkit.
Yeah. So, I think the pandemic made real some things that higher education just needed to do. For example, we just needed more online access. And my campus was particularly resistant. That changed as a result of the pandemic. Now we're growing with our online enrollment. We're never going to be an online university, but it's an important delivery mode, especially for reaching diverse audiences, adult learners, people with crazy families, schedules, and issues. They need that flexibility. So that was one thing. I think, the pandemic, one of the lever categories that we talk about in the toolkit is in the realm of externalities. We frame it in that way. And the pandemic was a lever. COVID was a lever for change. So we just used that in a way I would not have been able to lead the change that I did without the pandemic. Some things we were headed toward, but other things became urgent because of the pandemic. We needed to focus on growing our enrollment so that we could begin to grow while we were making the budget cuts that we needed to make. And that worked. And thankfully, one of the first things I did as chancellor, there were two things I did that were smart. One was I established a campus-wide budget advisory council. There was no campus-wide budget governance process. So that was already in place, thankfully. And then the second thing I did, I actually did that second. The first thing I did was I built an enrollment management team, which we didn't have. And so that team was already functioning before the pandemic. So during and after the pandemic, they could just keep greasing their wheels. If we had to build that after the pandemic, there's no possible way that we would have seen the 3 and 4% growth that we saw year over year. So I think that lever of the pandemic created opportunities for change that didn't exist before. And I could use it to tell the campus, look, here's our budget situation. Here's our enrollment situation. If we don't address these things, here's the projections. And so we did these budget projections that showed it was going to get ugly, right? And so that in combination with a shared leadership approach of then bringing people in, engaging them in the problem, helped us recover. Now, we don't talk a lot about shared leadership in the Change Leadership Toolkit, but it is an important approach to consider. So to me, the two are complementary. So that's why I talk about both of them all the time in any opportunity that I have, like this one.
I think the most important question that is yet to be asked right now is how the heck I get my hands on this Change Leadership Toolkit. I mean, do I got to send you a check? Do I got to hire you? Because I mean, honestly, there are a bunch of people out there. They're doing something right now, whether it's technology or curricular or something, trying to manage change in their university and need all the help they can get to accomplish their goals. How do we get our hands on this toolkit?
Awesome question. First of all, it's a free download. So you don't have to. I know. When is anything ever free?
Seriously.
It's free.
There's only two things for free in the world: the EdUp Experience podcast main episodes and the Change Leadership Toolkit. That's it.
There we go. So I can provide a link that you can put somewhere, but you can go to the University of Southern California's Polius Center website and look for the Change Leadership Toolkit there. Put your email address in. They'll send you a link. You can get the PDF. So while the toolkit is free for you to download, it's complicated to implement on your own. So, of course, then you should hire me to help you with the toolkit and creating a comprehensive change leadership plan. So happy to help people. I also, so not only do I work with campuses, but I work one-to-one with leaders as a change leader coach. So not an executive coach, but just helping people think through and navigate the complexities of leading big, hairy change. So happy
where do we get a hold of you, Susan? Where do we find you? Where do we get a hold of you?
You can reach me at, first of all, I have a website, changeleadershipgroup.org. You can also email me at susan@changeleadershipgroup.org. You can find me on LinkedIn, Susan Elrod, ELROD. Connect with me there. And so those are 3 good ways you can find me and learn more.
I guess we got the answer to what is life after the chancellorship. Sounds like you've got your hands full with this kind of work.
I'm busy.
Well, I think higher ed's busy. Higher ed's busy trying to facilitate change, and we need people out there that can help advise us on how to create and sustain and implement that change. I'm not necessarily in that order, but you get the point.
Right.
And
Yep.
Dr. Susan Elrod is the person that you should look to, the Change Leadership Toolkit. Maybe what I can do with my newsletter on LinkedIn that has almost 4,000 subscribers, I can maybe do an article on the Change Leadership Toolkit summary, put
Absolutely.
Susan's information in there, and put it out to all of our leaders. But we can do something there to help get you the message, higher education, that Susan's here to help. At Lucian Live 2025, we're going to explore the magic of innovation. We want to imagine, believe, and achieve. It's happening April 6th through 9th, 2025 in Orlando, Florida, and we're going to explore technology, modernization, and
artificial intelligence.
Explore the latest technology solutions, discover industry insights, and make valuable connections as a global community. It's time to register for Ellucian Live 2025 at elive.ellucian.com.
Did you buy your tickets yet? Higher Education's first podcast conference is coming July 12th. Go to higheredpodcon.com, higheredpodcon.com. Get your tickets. Do you want to get invites to special events? Do you want to get exclusive early access to ad-free episodes, extended episodes, bonus episodes, behind-the-scenes episodes, and original content? Do you want to accelerate your professional development? Well, you can go to edupexperience.com. That's EDUP experience.com and become a subscriber today.
Awesome. And if I can just close with this comment, I think a lot of people are afraid of change. They're afraid partly because they don't know how to approach it. And so what I would say is the Change Leadership Toolkit breaks it down for people into manageable chunks and helps them put it back together in ways that they can understand it and that make sense to them and that help them in 3 to 6 month periods. And then you do it again and you do it again. And so I think big, hairy change can really happen if you just use these resources and just don't be afraid of it, because you just have to break it down, understand it, and take it in manageable chunks. Happy to help.
Mary, what'd you think about this conversation with your friend Susan here?
Yeah, no, I
And
was
my
really
friend Susan.
excited. No, I was really excited because I've been talking with Susan and learning about the change leadership approach that she's developed with her colleagues. And honestly, I think it's just really smart, and it really recognizes what the experience is on a campus. So it's not just coming from some theoretical framework from outside without really understanding what that means, and imposing it on the campus or the higher ed environment. But it's really organic, that comes out of a long career and real research with institutions of all kinds. And I would just add that this approach, the beauty of it is it also develops muscles on campuses and in leaders that continue even beyond the particular defined period of sort of change implementation. And I think that's really powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's Dr. Mary Papazian. She is the Executive Vice President at the Association of Governing Boards. If you don't know AGB, you don't know higher ed, I would check out AGB, Mary's work, download all their free resources, and your trustees at your campus probably are a part of AGB, so you better get up to date real fast on that. And of course, our guest of honor, ladies and gentlemen, she's Dr. Susan Elrod. She is the former Chancellor of Indiana University, South Bend, and she's leading change through higher education. Look her up, find her, download the Change Leadership Toolkit. We'll put it in the show notes. Ladies and gentlemen, you've just EdUp'd.